Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jen, and on this channel, we talk about the reality of surviving and eventually escaping life on the streets. We don't sugarcoat things here. We talk about the grit, the danger, the hustle, and the profound betrayals that happen when people are living on the very edge of society. Today, I want to share a story from a specific chapter of my life. It's a story about attachments, deception, and the absolute powerlessness you feel when you're living off the grid as a runaway. When you live on the streets, your relationship with physical objects completely changes. You don't have a bedroom. You don't have a closet. Everything you own has to fit on your back, or, if you're lucky, in the trunk of a friend's car. Because of this, the things you do manage to hold on to become incredibly precious. They aren't just objects anymore, they are anchors to a past life, or perhaps the life raft to a future one. When you have something valuable, you can't just carry it around, you have to stash it. You have to trust people. And out there, trust is the most dangerous currency of all. This is the story of my ex-boyfriend, Alan, a garage full of ghosts, and the day I learned exactly how far someone will go to cover their tracks. Alan and I were the definition of a toxic, chaotic, trauma-bonded couple. We lived together on and off for about 2 or 3 years. I say on and off because consistency wasn't exactly our strong suit. Our relationship was a revolving door of drama, mostly fueled by his chronic inability to stay faithful. We won't dive too deep into the cheating today. That's a whole other video for another time. But suffice it to say, trust was already a fractured foundation in our dynamic. When you're young, vulnerable, and trying to navigate the world without a safety net, you often cling to the people you know, even if those people are hurting you. Familiar pain sometimes feels safer than the terrifying unknown of being completely alone on the streets. So I kept going back. We would fight, we would break up, I would leave, and then the sheer exhaustion of survival would pull us back into each other's orbit. But eventually, a switch flips. You wake up one day, look around at the wreckage of your life, and realize that you were drowning, and the person holding your hand is the one pulling you under. We had been officially broken up for about 6 months. For half a year, I had managed to keep my distance, to clear my head, and to start piecing my independence together. 6 months is a lifetime when you're young and living on the edge. I was finally waking up to the reality that if I didn't cut the cord completely, Alan would always be a dead weight around my ankle. It was time to sever the final ties. There was just one problem. I still had some of my things stored in his parents' garage. Now, when I say things, I don't mean a couch or a television. I mean the small, fragmented remnants of a life I was trying to build. But among those random boxes, there was something incredibly specific and surprisingly valuable that belonged to me. 2 heavy velvet-lined display cases of Princess House crystal. For those of you who might be too young to remember, or who just didn't run in those circles, Princess House was a direct sales company, a lot like Avon or Tupperware, but for high-end, beautiful crystal and glassware. Women would host these little parties in their living rooms, serve finger foods, drink wine, and the sales representative would lay out this gorgeous, sparkling spread of crystal goblets, serving trays, and display pieces. At one point in my life, amidst the chaos and the running, I had tried to be that sales representative. I know it sounds wild in retrospect. Picture me, a runaway navigating the rough underbelly of street life, trying to hustle fine dining crystal. But you have to understand the psychology behind it. When your life is dirty, unpredictable, and raw, you crave things that are delicate, clean, and beautiful. Selling that crystal wasn't just a hustle for cash, it was a desperate cosplay of normalcy. I wanted to be the kind of girl who hosted parties in a clean living room. I wanted to hold something fragile without breaking it. I had invested in the starter kits. I had these 2 massive, sturdy display cases filled with some of the most beautiful glass pieces you've ever seen. Heavy lead crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows against the walls. They were my pride and joy, and they were worth a significant amount of money, or at least it was to me. When Alan and I split, I couldn't drag 2 heavy cases of delicate crystal around with me. I needed a safe, secure place to stash them until I could figure out what to do with them. His parents lived in a quiet, normal neighborhood. Their garage seemed like the safest place in the world. Surely, I thought, they would be safe there. I forgot the golden rule of street life. Nothing is safe when an addict or a hustler knows where it is. Alan had a well-documented proclivity for pawning other people's property. If it wasn't nailed down and it had a resale value, Alan would find a way to turn it into quick cash. I knew this about him. I knew it in my bones. But I wanted to believe that the sanctity of his parents' home and the sheer audacity of stealing from me again would keep my crystal safe. I was wrong. I called up my friend Tess. Tess was a lifeline during those days. She was tough. She had a car, and she didn't take any nonsense from anybody. I told her I needed to make a run to Alan's parents' house to get my stuff, specifically the crystal, and I needed backup. She was in without hesitation. I remember the drive over there. We drove out of the gritty areas we usually hung around and crossed the invisible boundary into the suburbs. The lawns were green, the driveways were paved, and the houses looked solid and secure. It always felt surreal to transition between those 2 worlds. It felt like trespassing. We pulled into his parents' driveway, the garage door was open, and there was Alan. Right away, the vibe was completely off. The moment I stepped out of Tessa's car, I could see it all over him. If you've ever spent time around people who are living shady lifestyles, you develop a sixth sense for guilt. It's a physical aura. Alan was vibrating with it. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, avoiding direct eye contact, his eyes darting between me, Tess, the car, and the boxes stacked in the corner of the garage. He had that classic, pathetic, guilty shuffle going on. I ignored him. I didn't want to talk about our relationship. I didn't want to hear his excuses for the past. I just wanted my things. Tess and I started grabbing the smaller boxes. Old clothes, some books, random knickknacks. We tossed them into the back of her car. Alan just hovered. He followed us around like a nervous shadow, hands jammed deep in his pockets, offering entirely unhelpful comments and trying to make small talk. The air in that garage felt thick, heavy with the smell of motor oil, old cardboard, and impending conflict. Finally, the trunk was mostly loaded. Only the 2 large display cases remained in the corner. I walked over to them. I bent down, grabbed the thick leather handles of the first case, and braced myself. Lead crystal is heavy. I knew exactly how these cases were supposed to feel. I lifted it up, and the familiar, dense weight pulled at my shoulders. I carried it over to the car, set it down, and walked back for the second one. I grabbed the second case, hoisted it up, again it was perfectly satisfyingly heavy, and turned around. That was when Alan physically stepped in front of me, blocking my path to Tessa's car. "Look," he said, his voice cracking slightly. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. He looked like a cornered animal. "I have to explain something." I stopped. I was holding this heavy case, my arms already starting to ache, staring at this man who had put me through so much hell over the last 3 years. "What, Alan?" I snapped. "What do you have to explain?" He swallowed hard, looking at the concrete floor. "The crystal. I don't have it." I stared at him, my brain trying to process the contradiction. I was physically holding the heavy case. My arms were shaking from the weight of it. What did he mean he didn't have it? What are you talking about? I asked, my voice rising. I'm holding the case right now. It's heavy. What did you do? He took a step back, wincing as if expecting me to hit him. I pawned it, he mumbled. I pawned the crystal. Because of course he fucking did. A wave of absolute blinding fury washed over me, immediately followed by profound confusion. I looked down at the case in my hands. If he pawned the crystal, why was the case so heavy? What was inside? I dropped the case onto the hood of Tessa's car. I popped the metal latches, click, click, and threw open the lid. I fully expected to see empty velvet indentations, perhaps weighed down with some rocks or scrap metal from the garage. Instead, I was greeted by a wall of dense yellow paper, phone books. The case was packed tight, edge to edge, with perfectly stacked, tightly wedged old telephone directories. I stood there, paralyzed by the sheer absurdity of what I was looking at. I opened the other case. More phone books. The yellow pages of the local directory staring back at me, almost mocking me. Phone books? I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You filled my cases with phone books? Alan nodded, taking another step back. Yeah, see, I knew you'd come by eventually to check on your stuff, and I knew you'd pick up the cases and move them. I didn't want you to notice the weight difference. I figured if they felt heavy, you wouldn't open them right away, and I'd have time to figure out how to get the money to get them out of pawn. Let that sink in for a moment. He didn't just steal from me in a moment of desperate impulse. He meticulously planned the cover-up. He calculated the weight of lead crystal. He went around finding enough thick, dense phone books to exactly match the weight of fine glass. He carefully arranged them in the velvet slots where my goblets used to sit, ensuring they wouldn't rattle if the case was shaken. He put more effort into deceiving me than he ever put into our relationship. The betrayal wasn't just the theft. It was the premeditation. It was the absolute disrespect. I exploded. I am not proud of the scene I caused in that quiet suburban driveway, but I lost my fucking mind. Years of pent-up anger, resentment, and betrayal poured out of me. I yelled, I cursed, I threw a phone book at his chest. I screamed about how pathetic he was, how he destroyed everything he touched, how he had taken the one nice, pure, legitimate thing I owned and traded it for whatever quick fix or hustle he was chasing that week. Tess jumped out of the car, stepping between us, her hands raised, ready to throw down if Alan made a move. But Alan didn't fight back. He just stood there, taking it, looking small and useless, muttering apologies that meant absolutely nothing. The crystal was gone. And staring at those phone books, I realized that any lingering illusion I had about who Alan was or what we had been was gone too. The yelling eventually stopped, replaced by a cold, desperate pragmatism. If he pawned it, there was a ticket. If there was a ticket, there was a shop. Give me the ticket, I demanded, holding out my hand. He hesitated, fishing into his wallet and pulling out a crumpled, yellowed slip of paper. He handed it over. I looked at the date. My heart sank into my stomach. It was old, way past the grace period. Get in the car, I told Tess. We left Alan standing in his driveway, surrounded by scattered yellow pages, and we drove straight to the pawn shop listed on the ticket. We pulled up to one of those depressing neon-lit storefronts that prey on desperate people. Iron bars on the windows, a dusty display of cheap guitars and stolen power tools in the front. I walked in, slammed the ticket down on the glass counter, and told the guy behind the register I was there to redeem the items. The clerk, a guy who looked like he hadn't smiled since the late 80s, picked up the ticket, typed the numbers into his archaic computer, and shook his head. "Tickets expired, sweetheart," he grunted. "Items belong to the shop now." "They're my items," I pleaded, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "My ex-boyfriend stole them and pawned them without my permission. They are stolen property. I have the cases they go in out in the car." The clerk looked at me with dead, apathetic eyes. "I don't care about your boyfriend drama. The ticket's expired. If you want the crystal back, you gotta buy it back at retail floor price." He punched a few more keys and turned the register toward me. The price he quoted was astronomical. It included the original loan amount, the exorbitant interest, the late fees, and the markup for the showroom floor. It was hundreds of dollars. It was cash I absolutely did not have. To a runaway, it might as well have been $1 million. "I can't afford that," I whispered. "Then I can't help you," he said, turning away to organize a tray of cheap watches. This is the part of the story where people who grew up safe, housed, and protected always ask the same question. Why didn't you just call the cops? He stole from me. The pawn shop was holding stolen property. It's an open and shut case, right? Wrong. Not when you're living on the streets. Not when you are a runaway. When you're a runaway youth, the police are not your friends. They are not a resource for justice. They are just a direct threat to your freedom. If I called the police to report a theft, the first thing they would do is ask for my ID. They would run my name through the system. And the moment my name popped up as a missing juvenile, the theft of some glass cups would become completely irrelevant. They would put me in the back of a squad car. I would be taken to juvenile hall or placed in a holding facility, and eventually I would be forced back to the very situation I had risked my life to run away from in the first place. Alan knew this. The pawn shop owner probably sensed it. That is the bitter, jagged pill of street life. When you exist outside the system, you forfeit the protection of the system. You become the perfect victim. People can steal from you, hurt you, and betray you, and they know with absolute certainty that you cannot call the authorities. Your silence is guaranteed by your own survival instinct. I stood in that dingy pawn shop, staring through the glass counter, and I felt a profound, crushing disappointment. Not just in Alan, though his betrayal stung deeply. I was disappointed in the world. I grieved the loss of those beautiful, sparkling pieces of glass because they represented a version of myself I was trying to build. A girl who had nice things, who hosted parties, who belonged in the normal world. Alan hadn't just pawned my crystal, he had pawned my hope and replaced it with garbage. Tess and I walked out of the pawn shop empty-handed. We got back into her car and we sat in silence for a long time. I never went back to Alan's parents' house. I never spoke to Alan again. In a weird, twisted way, the theft of the Princess House crystal was the final push I needed. The phone books were such a tangible, undeniable physical manifestation of his lies that I could no longer make excuses for him. Every time I thought about giving him another chance, I just pictured those heavy, musty yellow pages stuffed into velvet lining, and the urge to go back evaporated. Living on the streets strips you of your possessions, piece by piece. You lose your clothes, your sentimental items, your money, and sometimes your dignity. But the most valuable thing you have to fight to keep is your perspective. I lost something valuable that day, but I also shed a massive liability. I walked away from a toxic cycle that would have eventually destroyed me. I learned that you cannot anchor your hope for a better life to fragile things, whether that's lead crystal or a broken person who refuses to heal. If you are out there right now and you're holding on to someone who is constantly replacing your trust with lies, who is stealing your peace and hiding it behind heavy excuses, please know that you have the right to walk away. You don't need to wait for them to pawn your future to realize they aren't worth your present. And if you are a young person living on the streets, feeling trapped because you think you can't reach out for help without getting locked up or sent back to an abusive situation, There are resources that can help you confidentially. If you're a runaway or thinking about running away, please reach out to the National Runaway Safe Line at 1-800-RUNAWAY. That's 1-800-786-2929, or visit 1-800-runaway.org. They are free, confidential, and available 24/7. They won't judge you, and they won't force you to go back to a dangerous home. If you are dealing with a toxic or abusive relationship, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233, or text the word START, S-T-A-R-T, to the number 88788. You are worth more than the lies people tell you. Stay safe out there, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next video.